One of these days, Will Carell and I were here before school started, having nothing to do but sit and wait for our mom to stop talking to each other. He said, "Hey, you want to come over to my house and we can just hang out and do something?" Okay. Went over there and he said his favorite board game was Risk. I had never played Risk before, and I knew I'd be terrible at it, but I was bored, so I said, yeah. So we divided up the pieces. He explained the rules to me. He said, "Do you want to go first?" I said, yeah. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take all your people. About 5 minutes later, the first round was over, and my turn, I had just finished my turn, and I had only one troop on each of my countries left, and he had lost 5 people entirely. Never going to play that game again. Tactics. Battle tactics are essentially battle plans where legions of armies are set up on a battlefield, and how they're move around on the battlefield. There are 3 basic units that consist in the battlefield. There's a common foot soldier, which is probably the most expendable, cheapest unit on the field. But luckily, they figured out a way to gather together in numbers and increase their strength. The groups can be as small as a fire team, similar to 4 people, or a region, which could be made of multiple armies. Second, there is the cavalry, which is a heavily armored soldiers mounted on a horse or a tactics like tanks or Humvees. They're stronger and faster, and they have the ability to strike a certain area and then pull back before reinforcements arrive. Oftentimes they're used to support foot soldiers to strengthen the group. And their strength lies in speed and agility. Third, there's the most powerful machine, is war machine. It is slow, big, devastating, and until recently, terribly inaccurate. An example of this would be the trebuchet, which was this gigantic 2-story tall catapult that was designed to try to either take down or overshoot the wall in medieval times. Taking like an hour 15 minutes to set up, and then its accuracy was based on the previous shot. I was trying to hit that wall, I'd shoot over a mile. So I had to pull it back. It would shoot under a mile. There was one more unit I really won't talk about. It's the Navy, because until recent times, it really wasn't used in warfare combat on land, because they really didn't have an effective way to attack land without fire arrows, which wouldn't go very far. They were either meant for troop transport, supply transport, or they would often have battles on the ocean, which were completely separate. They ran each other and beat each other, which is cool, but much better. Ancient warfare will be defined as pre-gunpowder age, fighting use of pre-gunpowder age weapons, like from when Cain killed Abel with a stone to the late Middle Ages when Cain was pushing them. Modern combat began around 1450 AD when the era of the knighthood was ended with the invention of the gunpowder. It carries the term. This starts out with these cumbersome cannons that really didn't do any more than just scare horses, to the advancements of systems we have today, which can from an aircraft thousands of feet in the air can shoot and hit a target within 2 square feet. Technology in relation to warfare is the tools and weapons that are ever changing and improving, which are used by soldiers in battle. Ancient technology would consist of swords, shields, bows, lances, and siege machines, which are 3 types of ancient siege machines: the catapult, siege tower, and battering ram. These had very, very humble origins. The catapult, like when I throw a stone at you, wasn't very much powerful until they advanced systems were eventually developed. The siege tower started out as me trying to get up onto a wall, so I built a ladder, and eventually, when they pushed the ladder over a million times, the guy fell on the ground and said, "There's got to be a better way to do this." So they would erect these huge towers and put them on wheels that were like 5 levels, and then you'd finally be able to be tall enough to hop over the wall. Which didn't always work either, because they're all made out of wood and planks and and being in the middle of that line was nothing ideal. Then the battering ram was designed to take down gates, and it started out probably with a bunch of guys grabbing a big log and ramming into a gate, while they were probably being poured burning acid on their heads, and then there's got to be a better way to do this. So they build like wheels for it and have a little canopy over, and then they would build a huge metal head on the front to make it last longer. Darwin says that one of the famous quotes is that the world thrives on war. War progresses civilizations either by empowering the victors or destroying the vanquished to make room for a better, more advanced civilization. War brings the best people to dominate and influence the world. To spread influence, a people must dominate the domination on the battlefield. Tactics are the most important thing. You must have effective tactics to claim the victory. Even though you may be down in numbers and inefficient with troops or supplies, the better tactics will eventually claim the day. A great example of this would be the Battle of Cannae during the Punic Wars, when Hannibal has much fewer men than the Romans did, but the Romans moved in a giant block when they attacked Hannibal, and he set up a small strip in front, and while he was fighting, they would back up and lure the Romans in, and then they sent 2 wings to crush on the side, and the Romans had nowhere to go, and they were just slaughtered. And Hannibal, though, was thousands and thousands of fewer men and less supplies and victory that day. Technology, along with tactics, is also an important factor, though it's not quite as important. If you have better weapons, they're more advanced, they're not always going to claim the day, such as in the 300 story, where only 300 Spartans only had spears, swords, and no shields. They still held up against the massive Persian army, which had elephants, cavalry, lances. They had it. That's because tactics claimed that day again. Tactics on a whole haven't changed throughout history as much as technology has. Even though technology has changed, it really hasn't affected battle tactics on the war field. Technology improves rather than changes. It improves in accuracy and lethality, such as the sword and changing into the handgun, the spear into a rifle, bow into the sniper rifle. It all increases in range rather than changes completely, such as the catapult to the rocket system, which is one sweet artillery piece that I was told about. but now we like where before it was never mind. Regardless of speed, size, or stealth of the latest invention of war, the employment of that new toy on the battlefield commander gives you tends to follow tried and true to the principles used by Patton Williams and Alexander. The advancement of technology has just taken fight to a broader scale in both range and lethality, such as where Mr. Smith and I would have to be right here to sword fight. Now we can be on their separate fields to shoot at each other. The basic units of an army have changed very little as well. When formerly there was a man with a sword, a horseman with a lance, and a crew with a catapult, there is now a man with a rifle, a pilot in an armored helicopter, and a crew manning a tank or rocket launcher. Then as now, they share nearly the same purpose. They just do it from a further away and create a bigger hole in the ground. Aircraft, one might say, would completely defy all these rules that I just gave. It does not, however. Aircraft, I will define as anything that has the ability to fly. It is used for many purposes, such as transportation of troops, supplies, scouting, paratrooping troops behind enemy lines, dropping bombs, and ridding the sky of other enemy aircraft. This is not a new innovation, however. It works off the old principle of whoever has, where the term the upper hand came from, whoever is on a higher elevation is more likely to win the fight. Such as, because it was much easier to defend down than to attack up. An example of this would be the Battle of Bunker Hill, when the British were trying to attack the very small American force that was on top of the hill. It took them hours and hours and multiple raids, and they lost tons and tons of men. But even because the Americans were settled on the top of the hill, they were much easier to defend their position. And so that is what the aircraft works off of. It comes from a higher elevation, and it is easier to attack from that higher place. Is basically just a bigger range bow and arrow. The bow and arrow works off shooting up and over the shields of army people. Castles also are like this, because they were built on top of a hill. They were more easy to defend and were. Yeah. While the ancients could only attack their enemies as far and high as accurately as a bow could shoot an arrow, a flying force can now bomb an entire city from an aircraft thousands of feet in the air that is virtually invisible to naked eye and recently difficult to detect on radar as well. Technology has greatly, even drastically changed over the centuries. From swords to guns, from elephants to tanks. Tactics have not changed a whole lot as much as technology has, but rather has expanded to a greater scale. The invention of gunpowder and its use in projectiles as weapons made the distance between the soldiers increase. Tactics used by Caesar and other military geniuses of ancient times were studied by successful generals today. Rules of war, dominating techniques used centuries ago are still relevant today, such as flanking, troop formation, ambushes, and guerrilla warfare. The great generals of past times were inspirational leaders and practical geniuses, and should be praised on the battlefield for the lessons they still offer. Any questions? No.
Nope. Hold your horses. Or your tanks, or your whatever anyhow. I guess I've been thinking about this a lot recently. The whole fact that large traditional forces seem to have real difficulties with insurgencies and guerrilla forces like the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, the U.S. in Vietnam, the U.S. in Iraq. How do you think that fits in with what you're saying? Is that more common now? Is it more common?
Are you talking about like the faceless suicide bombers?
No, I'm talking about the fact that large armies seem to have trouble with small, under-equipped.
Well, I mean, that's just much like the Machiavellism we were talking about. They have much more passion, so they're going to fight much harder.
But I mean, even tactically, it seems like they seem to, at some level, have an advantage. Is that more common? Do you think technology has affected that? Did you have did the Romans ever have to deal with these things like that? I guess. Sorry, I'm not asking the question very well. Sorry, don't count well for that, Mr. Smith. I'm just asking it really stupidly.
You want to rephrase it?
Yeah, I'll give that another shot. Did you see large traditional ancient armies?
Okay, yeah. Like
in the same way as
Afghanistan
and yeah.
Like the Persians were taking over the entire known world basically, and then they ran into the tiny Greeks who didn't want to give up what they stood for. And in about 300, they said, "No way, get out of here."
But I guess I was asking as well, tactically, do small guerrilla forces, they seem to have somewhat of an advantage in modern times with that, even aside from their enthusiasm, I guess you could say. Do they?
Yeah, they're better than we were.
Okay, sorry.
You kind of talked about how a tactical advantage can outweigh advantage of numbers or supplies, and you cited a lot of specific battles, but it seems like for the most part those smaller, less well-supplied troops would usually win battles but ultimately lost wars, I think specifically Hannibal, who won at Cannae, or however you say that battle, but ultimately was sent back to Carthage by a larger force. And also, there's a lot of other wars where I think it's pretty generally acknowledged that, in the American Civil War, the South had a lot of good tactics and good leadership, but ultimately lost to a much larger force just because they were smaller. And how do you see that happening?
Well, I guess in the end, whoever's got the bigger gun wins. But all the smaller forces that I'm talking about did devastate the larger forces quite often enough.
So, is the importance of tactics more a battle-to-battle situation where, overall winning the war is going to depend on things like the technology you talked about and...
Well, it depends on numbers. But, our paper really is just confined to the battle, not the war. Do you have a question on paper?
I do not. I have not asked a question at every paper this year. I've been good.
Okay, all the ones I was waiting for.
Okay. Well, I haven't asked one at every paper, so don't. No. With the whole thing of tactics, and you talked about warfare being almost survival of the fittest, and then the whole thing of whoever has the bigger gun wins. This might be outside of the scope of your paper, but with stuff like nuclear weapons, is that ever an okay tactic, or does that even correspond to any of those tactics, or is that you talked about, or is that something so outside that you shouldn't even consider?
So saying having better weapons.
Or just do you see it corresponding to any of those old type tactics, or is it something completely new that you can't really relate to the old kinds of tactics? We have this ability to go wipe out entire countries as opposed to, a city or whatever. And is that an acceptable tactic?
Well, the thing is, the people who usually have the bigger guns will just get cocky and say, all we need to do is walk in and wave it around and we'll win. Like the Romans did in Battle of Cannae, they said, well, we've got millions of guys, all we need to do is just walk in and say, we're here, we can kill you. But, that's usually what gets them in trouble. Because they'll just neglect to try to actually come up with a decent plan. They'll just walk in. Where, Hannibal said, well, this is what I got to work with, so let's try to expose technology, advanced weapons are good to have as long as you don't depend on them entirely.
So I feel like you've been saying that if you have smaller numbers, you're gonna have to rely on tactics. If you have large numbers, you usually rely on force. So if you were commanding a little army,
Well, first of all, I said you have a large army, you should have tactics.
yes, but they usually rely.
That's where you get in trouble.
Right. But so if you had an army and you wanted to go kill some people, would you, if you were setting up your battle the way you wanted to, would you, and you had the same amount of men as the other side, would you take a smaller force in, rely on tactics, and then bring in reinforcements? Or would you take them all in?
Well, I find a suitable tactic in putting them all.
All in.
Depending on the other army, if it was like 5 people, maybe not, but the Chinese army.
Okay, this may not be a fun question, but it seems to be one of those big questions that someone's going to ask. I know how you said that, like, tactics haven't much changed, and you made it, and I think I agree with you, especially the way you presented it, but what do you think that, like, a lot of people say that now war is so much less honorable because there isn't, like, you know, the fighting, like,
You mean it's more impersonal?
yeah.
It's not as intimate?
What do you, and less honorable as well, what do you feel about that? So,
Actually, I think there's plenty of honor left in it. It's just that, and I really don't think it's much as disappointing that our enemy doesn't really have a face anymore. If that's what you're saying. And it doesn't take any honor out of it. It doesn't. It just makes it easier and more relaxed. But now we have like a country that is just off, we'll just fly an airplane over it and bomb it. Which I think it's pretty cheap. But the thing is, everyone has those bombs. So I mean, the thing is, I guess the rite of conquest kind of works, and manifests as things moving, and you have to stay with the times. If you're one of the people who says, well, you need to be honorable if you're gonna die. So I mean, it's just true. The thing is, the times call for a completely different. So yes, it is less honorable, but you can't fix it. You know what I'm saying?
and everyone's kind of equal-ish.
Equally as honorable.
Yeah. I mean, like, yes, if we stuck to that the personal way, we would be more virtuous, but you can't anymore. Yes.
Me? Yeah. I can't see your expression here. Sorry, I can tell you who you were looking at. I thought this was outside the scope of your paper, but since Catherine jumped on the bandwagon, I'm going to too. So, I guess I'm thinking that it seems like I'm going to make a statement and say, argue with that. So it's not exactly a question. It seems like in the U.S. throughout most of our history has had somewhat of a like rules of war, Geneva Convention, even before there necessarily was one kind of attitude towards war. I'm not saying we've always been perfect on that. I'm just saying that like during the British during the Revolutionary War, if they would get like basically like fined, they would get in trouble if they took a prisoner alive as opposed to killing him. And George Washington, and I will say that.
Oh,
Sorry, Grant. Okay, Washington.
No, just some of the questions.
He would like. I think I would get his men in trouble if they killed a prisoner. And so I guess I was thinking the U.S. since you're talking about how ideas of honor have changed over time, it seems like at some level there's some of the same kinds of honor. Like the U.S. has a lot of the same principles in place in the 1700s and in the 1940s. I mean, like whether you shoot a civilian with a flintlock or an assault rifle, I mean, it seems like the U.S. would not have been happy with either one at the time. So I'm saying it seems like in the same way that tactics haven't really changed, some of the ideas of honor, at least, haven't necessarily changed with the technology either. So, you were.
Can I just say yes?
Well, it seems like when you were talking to Catherine, you were saying that it had changed, that the idea of honor had changed based on technology.
I think that was more of a, like,
Yeah, I really
battle.
don't.
Oh, within Babel as opposed to overarching, like, okay.
Yes.
That was my question.
I agree completely on the.
You'll probably get mad at me for asking this question later, but was there a tactic to you enjoying a beverage during your speech? It seemed like it was intentional.
Well, he said we could have beverages.
Oh.
I'm thirsty.
Okay. I didn't know if that, because I thought it was really clever if that was a tactic to take us off course. I'm trying to help you out here, Grant. And relax the audience and prove the point that this tactic of relaxation could bring the flanks in from behind the consequences.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty boring speech, so I maybe got.
Well, I didn't know. I thought it was very intentional. I thought it was very clever if that was what it was. Is that what it was? Yeah.
I'll just probably ask Mr. Smith about this before he might have said no. I just wanted to put that.
We'll ask permission when he has to.
That's what we learned in teacher.
I thought maybe you were imitating Mr. Smith as he drinks his coffee speaking every day or something. I thought there was something intentional.
He picks it up.
You're very
doesn't
funny and
drink
witty.
it,
I thought there was something else.
Yeah, you do.
You
But
do?
I
You
wanted
do?
to no, put it back down.
I almost fell asleep. I
know, I'm always like,
I put it down. I said no, I'm still
I got a question for you, Grant. Are you claiming that, or based on what you said, you may have said this and I missed it, for more technology to work, are you claiming that what makes it work is that it fits into a tactic that's been proven? So that, I guess, in terms of effectiveness in battle, it seems like you are privileging the tactic over the technology. Is that true?
No, the tactic, and when you go into battle, having a better tactic is ultimately going to be much more important than having a bigger gun.
So is it the case, or would you say in general, and there's always exceptions, but in general, is it the case that if a technology can't fit into a proven tactic, it's probably not going to be effective?
Yes.
Do you think that is true?
So it wouldn't hurt to have one of those in reserve.
Well, I mean, it's hard to, yeah. Okay, so let me ask this question. Do you think then, and you go a couple ways with this, but I think, I mean, that makes some sense to me. There are just some kind of rules that are in place that have been proven over time, and that regardless of how the technology changes, just like you're saying with, an airplane dropping a bomb, is in a way the same thing as being on top of a hill shooting an arrow, or you're just using height as an advantage.
You can just go for the original one.
Yeah. But what do you do then with, does it change things fundamentally, or is this just another way that technology or our use of it has maybe made use of a tactic? But what do you do with things like suicide bombers? Do they fit a tactic, or is that a technology and maybe even a new tactic itself that is fundamentally changing the way that we are engaged in battles?
Well, are we basing this argument? Are we basing this argument off of that there are rules of war?
Well, maybe or maybe not. I mean, I guess just starting with the general truth that you laid out about tactics that work seem to always be there, even when technology changes. And so, strapping a bomb to yourself, I mean, you could argue that's not necessarily a new technology, but it's a new strategy. But I wonder, does that fit into a tried and true tactic, or is that a fundamentally new approach to war? That's my question.
The problem I would say concerning them is that they our enemy now loses how to think. You know, like we're fighting the Russians. You know, we see a Russian individual and we say that's our enemy.
Yeah.
But now we just see a bunch of people walk around and going to market and we say which one of them is our enemy. And then one of them will pop out and then bomb us. So I mean the problem is we don't know who it is and so we're always on the lookout. And it's like they really don't have a set army, just a lot of crazy radicals running around doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So it's unpredictable and I believe it's how it is.
Yeah. Is that different from though? I mean, granted it's a different level, but well, maybe it is fundamentally different. Is it different from a guerrilla army that's got to just scrap and do whatever it can to not be beaten? I mean, is that just a tactic that if you do just have a few numbers and limited supply, you just resort to things like that? Or do you think this is an entirely different kind of warfare?
I mean, it's completely different. That's why it's so difficult to not. There's no organization, and like if we're basing the fact that like rules of war,
yeah,
you know, don't shoot someone unarmed,
yeah,
those kind of rules, then it's completely dishonorable.
Yeah. Do you think it's a tactic that ultimately works or ultimately fails?
Well, it's very effective, but it's cheap.
Yeah.
It's dishonorable. I mean, the thing is that the American Army and the Iraqi Army, the radical army, are working on completely different mindsets.
Yeah.
That's why it's so difficult.
Yeah.
But if they win, wouldn't you tell them it's very effective?
Oh, it's very effective, but wrong.
Yes.
It's unpersuasive.
But to their point of view, it is persuasive.
That's the problem. That's what I'm saying. I mean, mindset is completely off.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's the same, but completely different.
Yeah.
But as a tactic, even if it is a cheap tactic, could it ultimately be successful in the long run?
Alright, this is my last question, I promise. You hear a lot about, do you think it's okay to go for dishonorable or unvirtuous or whatever you're saying tactics in a war, if that's what works best? I'm basically asking, do the ends justify the means in your opinion?
It's all just on the individual conscience. I mean, like if I picked a fight with you and you had a broken leg and we were just, you know, I was just mad because you stole my chocolate milk in math class.
Sorry about that.
You know, I mean, like I could just, you know, push you and say, hey, don't do that anymore, and you could push me back and we could fight or whatever. Or I could just smack your, like take your boot off and smack your leg, and then you'd be down. You know, just be like, ah. I mean, you know, and I get my point across, but it'd just be unnecessary, and it'd just be dirty, because I mean, you have a weak point, and I just exploit it. So.
I was just wondering if you were thinking. There's been a lot of debate about that, you know.
If your enemy has a weakness, I mean, like it's kind of petty with the chocolate milk example, but if you were attacking the Islamic army because they just showed themselves, yeah, there is one now.
There is one. Emily has spoken.
No, but
Emily just started one.
And they have a weakness. Their mosques are their weakness. They're all in there. They would do what? They would do what? I mean, aside from the whole Christian thing.
Yeah, let's forget about the whole Christian thing.
I think that's what's happening now, is there are no rules of engagement anymore.
Yeah.
That's what's kind of scary about what we're in now, is the Geneva Convention is a joke to these guys. You know, and their ultimate goal is to die. So I'm reading an article the other day about the women that are all sitting around in their room and they're all excited about the fact that they're going to be picked to be a suicide bomber. They're holding their babies. I mean, they're holding their babies and they're ecstatic about the fact that they're training to die with bombs around their waist. So, you know, that's not Grant's topic, but it's kind of scary to think that once you go to a no-rule deal, I mean, you had the knife, the longbow, you had all these, Revolutionary War, they'd walk up to each other, 3 feet away with their bayonets and go, okay, you ready? And there was honor and integrity, and now, you put a bomb around a kid, and you let the kid die out there, and the kid gets to go to Allah or whatever, and you get to rejoice that your 5-year-old kid just got killed to get rid of the infidels. It's kind of a scary deal, isn't it?
It's in the Civil War, when they stopped battle, they'd all go out and shake hands and have parties and trade. That's because they didn't hate the individuals on the other side. They hated what they stood for. So that during the day they fight what they stood for, but at the end they loved each other. You know what I'm saying? I guess now they hate us for the individuals and for what we stand for.
And in World War II, the Germans and the Americans would have Christmas together.
Yeah.
They'd stop at Christmas and hang out.
So they'll do anything to kill us as individuals rather than just try to stop what we stand for.
Yeah, I mean, they're not gonna, they don't have any.
We're trying to stop what they stand for, and they're trying to stop our people.
So, if they have a weakness, is it bad to support?
We're talking about a weakness as in they don't have any archers and we do, so we'll use our archers against them, or weakness as in they're sleeping in their camp, let's go slaughter them. What kind of weakness are you saying?
I mean, if that's true, we could nuke them right now and be done with it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Nuke them and let God sort it out, right?
Okay, well, going back to suicide bombers,
I mean,
do you think?
if we exploit their weaknesses, just bomb them all.
I know, we're still on that.
Yeah,
We're still on that.
Do you think the overall tactic really has changed? It seems to me it's more the certainty of death for the individual that's changed. It seems like armies have always been sending some people to more dangerous places. Now it's just more, you're definitely going to die and kill other people more than, I guess it's more, in my opinion, the mentality than the tactics.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, that the mind is completely different. Or we say, well, what will be best for our men and our country before we go into battle? They'll say, well, what's best for my soul? Just killing myself.
And we think what's best is democracy, right? So we're trying to introduce democracy, and they just want to blow us all up.
But it seems like is what holds true in a lot of things. The tactics don't much change with people in mind.
Still on the suicide bomber thing, which I don't know necessarily if you're capable, whatever, we're doing, let's call it that anyway. Is that even a war tactic? Because it seems for the most part that those kind of things are civilian attacks on other civilians. Do those things even count as war tactics, or is that just crazy people?
I mean, like I said, they don't have an army. They just have a bunch of individual radicals that serve as a in the car.
But they've got to be led by some kind of idea.
I mean, the thing is, they're not showing themselves. They just